Another alert now. Houthi rebels firing upon the USS Mason after that ship.
Defense Department saying 4 boats with Houthi rebels from Yemen firing on U.S. Navy.
Starting tomorrow, President Trump says the U.S. military will begin blockading ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
India and Pakistan. The Taiwan Strait, where Chinese military exercises in 2025 repeatedly crossed lines that analysts had previously described as red ones. The bulletin of the atomic scientists did not set that clock to 85 seconds because of one crisis. They set it there because of all of them converging at once. And Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2012, was a generation alive and aware and scrolling through all of it simultaneously. On the other. The exchange lasted days before cooling. It did not cool because of diplomacy. It cooled because both sides blinked. For now, drop a comment right now and tell me which of these conflicts you actually knew about before this video. Because the algorithm has a way of hiding the things that matter most and surfacing the things that don't. That is the world that Generation Z inherited. Not one singular powder keg but a landscape of simultaneous powder kegs, each one with its own fuse, each fuse burning at a different speed. Ukraine, Iran, the South China Sea. Harrison, a professor at the University of North Carolina's Husman School of Journalism and Media, put it plainly when she described what was happening on TikTok in the wake of the Iranian strikes. It's not just fear, she said. It's a loss of innocence. There's a sense of betrayal and a real hit to a feeling of trust. A hit to trust. Think about what that means for a generation raised on the specific promise that the era of great power conflict was over, that the Cold War ended, history had been resolved, and the future was going to be about apps and climate. Real calculation. I like my job, wrote one person. I don't want my whole life derailed by something I didn't ask for. That's not softness. That's a person with a coherent life plan encountering the sudden reality that the state considers their body a military resource. The selective service system in the United States still requires male registration at age 18. It never went away. Most of Gen Z learned this and then promptly forgot it because there was no draft. There had pledges and rainbow crosswalks. These were people who were not just afraid of war. They were furious that war had showed up anyway. After being told it wouldn't. After being told the adults had handled it. Now go to Reddit. Go to the Gen Z forums. Read the thread from November 2024 titled "Is Anyone Else Worried About a Military Draft?" Go read what those young men wrote. Not memes. Not jokes. Real fear. CNBC. And then she said something that a screenwriter couldn't have written. With now what's happening, I don't know if we'd exist tomorrow. So I'm not sure how much to plan. I'm not sure how much to plan. That is the sentence this generation is living inside right now. Not panic. Not collapse. Just a quiet recalibration of what planning even means when the geopolitical floor keeps shifting beneath you. When you've watched a pandemic cancel your graduation, inflation cancel your savings account, and now a multi-front war emergency cancel your ability to feel meme to the draft panic to the TikTok girl in her WW3 outfit. This generation is the first in history to experience every geopolitical catastrophe as a personal, intimate, continuous notification. Previous generations read about wars in newspapers the morning after. They processed events with a 24-hour delay built in, a buffer between the event and the emotional response. Generation safe looking 5 years forward. Amrita Basin is 24. UC Berkeley graduate. Turned down a position at Meta because she watched too many of her friends get laid off as tech companies restructured around artificial intelligence. She started her own company instead, a B2B marketplace for overstock in logistics. She didn't frame this as defiance. She framed it as math. Entrepreneurship wasn't any more unstable than the others, she said. And then, what's at the end of the path is just no longer guaranteed. That sentence landed differently after June 2025, after the first confirmed US military strikes on Iranian soil since the hostage crisis era, after oil prices spiked 12% in a single trading session, after Axios ran a piece with a headline that said this isn't World War III but it may be the closest we've come in decades, after former anxiety to the foreground of every news alert on every phone owned by every member of a generation that had been digital since birth and had therefore been unable to look away from any of it for a single day of their conscious lives. And here is the dark engine running underneath all of this, the piece that connects the doomsday clock to the GTA NATO commanders began using phrases like final catalyst in public interviews, and the phrase was not immediately walked back by anyone in authority. The math of instability had gone from theoretical to actual. The threat had migrated from the background of daily abandoned the system because they were lazy. They abandoned it because it kept because it was built, from the bones up, to absorb punishment that would destroy anything less designed for this specific kind of war. The mockery of this generation rests on a fundamental misreading of the machine. Critics see the memes. They see the paralysis. Hardship are rarely destroyed by it. The ones who laughed at the P-47 Thunderbolt in 1943 were wrong about the machine not because they misread the specs, but because they misread what the machine represented, what it was backed by, what it could become under pressure. The generation being mocked right now for not being able to handle collapsing under them, and they needed something sturdier to stand on. The German pilot who pulled alongside Robert Johnson's destroyed P-47 in 1943, after emptying every gun he had into a machine that refused to die, eventually shook his head and flew away. He had done everything right. He had followed the doctrine. He had fired everything he had. And the thing the generation running the most entrepreneurial pivot in American economic history. 68% of Gen Z globally were freelancing or planning to in 2024, according to a Fiverr survey of over 10,000 respondents. Not because they love the hustle, because the alternative, trusting institutions to deliver on the promises they made, had demonstrably failed. They didn't abandon a group text, for posting outfit inspo during geopolitical crises, for replacing serious political engagement with dark humor and irony, is simultaneously kept flying. Not because it was invincible. And they had no idea what that generation was already quietly becoming. Let's go back further. In nuclear facilities in late June 2025, the comment sections of every news platform filled up with the same sentiment. Old men with profile pictures of American flags typing in full caps. Soft generation. Can't even handle a little conflict. You kids are going to crumble the moment it gets real. They watched Gen Z post about WW3 outfit inspo, memed their way through footage of burning buildings, and concluded that this was proof of a generation that had lost the plot entirely. Proof that smartphones and safe spaces had manufactured an entire demographic incapable of handling hardship. What those men didn't understand, what nobody in those comment sections had the context to grasp, was that they were watching one of the oldest human coping mechanisms in recorded history. They were watching people stare into a void and choose laughter over paralysis. Match. We were raised with war bleeding through our screens, he said. We've seen more armed drones, missiles, and mutilated children before 9 a.m. than any generation before us. He said that to CNBC. In a business article about career anxiety. That's the sentence that belongs in a history book. Because here is what the older commenters in those flag avatar accounts fundamentally misread. They assumed that laughing about WW3 outfits meant this generation didn't understand the stakes. They were wrong. The understanding was total. The understanding was the problem. A TikTok video caption "First War, kinda nervous," showing missiles falling on a city, got 2.3 million likes in less than 48 hours. 2.3 million people hit that button not because they found it funny, but because it was the only emotionally honest thing in their entire feed. It named the feeling nobody official was willing to name. This generation did not cope through ignorance. It coped through radical acknowledgement dressed up in irony. Telling, the part buried underneath the meme discourse and the draft panic and the doomsday clock announcements. This generation is not breaking walks. These were people who were not just afraid of war. They were furious that war had showed up anyway. After being told it wouldn't. After being told the adults had handled it. Now go to Reddit. Go to the Gen Z forums. Read the thread from November 2024 titled "Is anyone else worried about a military draft?" Go read what those young men wrote. Not memes. Not jokes. Real fear. CNBC. And then she said something that a screenwriter couldn't have written. With now what's happening, I don't know if we'd exist tomorrow. So I'm not sure how much to plan. I'm not sure how much to plan. That is the sentence this generation is living inside right now. Not panic. Not collapse. Just a quiet recalibration of what planning even means when the geopolitical the generation running the most entrepreneurial pivot in American economic history. 68% of Gen Z globally were freelancing or planning to in 2024, according to a Fiverr survey of over 10,000 respondents. Not because they love the hustle. Because the alternative, trusting institutions to deliver on the promises they made, had demonstrably failed. They didn't abandon a group text, for posting outfit inspo during geopolitical crises, for replacing serious political engagement with dark humor and irony, is simultaneously kept flying. Not because it was invincible.